Hello everyone, this is Defense Politics Asia and Commander, this is the situation report, the SITREP for the day of 834 for the 27th of May. And the frontline changes report has already been published. You can check it out over on DPA War. And I'm still thinking whether I want to do a delayed telecast on the main channel. So we're going to start off with the MiG-29 getting shot down over Ukraine. This is reported by the Russian Defense Ministry. They declared that a MiG-29 was shot down. So they didn't mention exactly where. So just you can take this with a pinch of salt. So we're gonna start. We're gonna continue over to the Kharkiv Front. So at the Kharkiv Front, the Russian forces continue their Kharkiv offensive. Maybe it's an offensive with fighting reported in the Lipsy sector in the near Lipsy, Zaporizhzhia sector over the Voschan sector, and there's fighting over at this region called Taike. Ukrainians are actually on the counteroffensive over at Lipsy, Zaporizhzhia, and Voschansk. So it doesn't feel like a Russian push anymore. It feels like a Ukrainian counteroffensive, despite all these red icons. So over in the Lipsy region, we have fighting reported over at Lipsy according to the Ukrainian Defense Ministry, and then in the latest report by the Russian Defense Ministry that there is fighting reported at Lipsy. So 5 attack repelled. Yeah, so correct. So the Russians are fighting around in this region. The front line is currently here, near Klipoke. There is no updates regarding the Klipoke situation. As you can see, the fighting is over in the high ground region. So yeah, so previously the Russians have actually a pretty decent position all around the high ground. Then they lost it as the Ukrainians counter attack and retaken this location. And the Ukrainians currently taking the high ground over here, 200 meters above sea level. And we move on over at the Zaporizhzhia region. The Russians were on the attack on the 27th. However, on the latest information on the 28th, the Russian Defense Ministry said that the Ukrainians are now on the counteroffensive. The previously was reported by the Ukrainians to say that the Russians are pushing. So currently, we're not sure what is currently happening per se. There is not much updates or geolocations in regards to this region here. Zaporizhzhia, this area of Zaporizhzhia is going to be pretty difficult to take. This area here, because you can see that across the river there is this high ground, and the Ukrainians could just potentially just fire on any Russian forces moving into the settlement, whereas the Russians seems to have the high ground on the other side of the shore. So essentially, this is going to be a no man's land. It's unlikely that we're going to see much conclusion from this area here. As you can see, this is the high ground, and the Ukrainians have the other side. So there is no idea, if this area here is under Russian control. So the Russians have to find another way around, or they are just getting stuck here at Zaporizhzhia. So we'll just continue to monitor the situation over at the Zaporizhzhia sector. Over the Voschan sector, I saw someone totally blind. They say that I'm reporting fake news about Voschan, saying that the Ukrainians have taken have half of the Voschans and actually counterattack and push out the Russians, or pushing out the Russians in the other half, which is exactly what this map is, right? This is Voschans. The Ukrainians have more than half of it. The Russians are trying to defend whatever they have conquered. Sometimes I read the comments, I also very confused. What the hell is happening with some people. Anyway, the Russians are stuck. They can't get out of whatever the front line is right now. The Ukrainians are holding the Russians back, and the Ukrainians are trying to counterattack. According to the Ukrainians, they say that it is the Russians that is fighting, is attacking, but Russians say that it's the Ukrainians that is counterattacking. So we'll just continue to monitor and see how this develop. I think the Russians are just holding the ground right now. I think the Ukrainians have the manpower advantage, I believe, at this area here. So we will just continue to monitor the situation at Voschansk. There is fighting reported at Taike on the 27th of May, according to the information from the Ukrainian Defense Ministry. Russian forces may or may not have Taike. So because there is a conflicting report from both sides, the front line is different. So we just continue to monitor and see how this develops around here. So that's all from the Kharkiv front. That's all we have there. So Commander, we go into the Kupyansk front, and over the Kupyansk front there is multiple developments around here. Fighting reported in the Vashana region towards Petropavlivka. There is fighting reported at Ivanivka. and Stepova, Novoselivka. There's fighting reported at Berestove. So this is the current strategic situation over at the Kupyansk front. If we zoom in further, so you can see actually there is actually 3 different directions that is currently developing over at the Kupyansk front. At the Veshana region, so what I need is to put into the satellite imaging. So there is this tree line. So this tree line around here was previously a gray zone. The Russian forces have taken this entire tree line. So this is the latest development around the Voshana region or the Sinkivka region. Russian forces taking this ground, which means that they can now bounce to the next ground, next tree line, and then the rest of the tree line is pretty far away. So this will set the Russians up pretty well to take the next tree line, the next one over here, and then then Sinkivka is going to be in some trouble. So that's the situation over here. At Ivanivka, the Russian forces are clearing up the captured Ivanivka, and they have already started to launch an attack towards Stepova, Novoselivka. So that's all we got at this moment, with the Ukrainian Defense Ministry reported about the fighting towards Stepova, Novoselivka. Let's look at the terrain. If we have anything, so nothing much. The Ukrainians have a little bit of high ground advantage over on this western part, but nothing very significant around here. So we move further south. The other front line is over at Berestove. The situation here remains the same. We do not have any additional information. Russian Defense Ministry claims the capture on the 26th, but we still have not have any corroboration after 24 to 36 hours. The Ukrainians seems to still have half of the settlement. The Russians have the other half. So we'll just continue to wait for more information. So we move into the Svatove front, Commander. So Commander, over at Svatove front, there is 2 main action. One in the south of Stemerkivka, the other one towards Gregivka. So these are 2 different directions. In this area here, there is the fighting at Masozarivka, according to the Ukrainian Defense Ministry. So there's some push, maybe related to this frontline change. But there's this development, and if this frontline change, since this is geolocation, which means the Russians are getting very close. If the Russians have not already captured Masozarivka, it looks like the Russians is going to launch an attack to capture this settlement for good. So, this is probably why we are seeing the reports of the fighting. But I think this is it's going to be very underreported. I think most people will not care about it because it's just one small little settlement that nobody cares. Over at the Gregivka or Novovodyan region, we have a frontline change over at Novovodyan with the Russian forces geolocated to attack this forest. They landed troops at the forest and then they proceeded to attack, so prompting the frontline change around here. So, but that's all we know. We do not know if the Russian forces actually survive or capture the ground. So we'll just wait. We just wait for more intel. For the Ukrainian side, they reported this as an attack near Gregivka. So they feel like the attack is much nearer. So let's wait and see how this goes. Over the Kreminna front, so Commander, at the Kreminna front, the Russians attack are mostly in the north towards Nevsky and towards Terny. The Ukrainians are attacking towards Dibrova. So that's about it. Nothing particularly interesting to really talk about. Over at the Siversk front, we have fighting reported over at Bilohorivka. Ukrainian forces allegedly counter-attacking. Russians are attacking at Verkhem-Okanyamsky towards Sperne in the region of Ivano-Darivka. I'm not sure it's from the south or from the north. And then there is fighting reported towards Vimka. So this is the current strategic situation. As you can see, this concentration of efforts by the Russian side is rather concerning over this year. And there is a correction in terms of the frontline changes over here. Previously, we have geolocated Russian forces over this central part of Bilohorivka. As mentioned in the frontline changes report, this has been corrected to possibility of the Russian flag being planted by drones. So, and I did mention before that there is an impossibility to hold this position due to this fortress or castle position. This high ground that is overlooking Bilohorivka, and which means that the Russian forces can't possibly have troops holding position there. And I did express my my doubts that the Russians are able to hold that position at all. So it shows that with this information, it does make more sense that the Russians may have just used a drone to drop one of the flag. There's another one. The other flag was claimed to be a possible, which is likely to be planted by infantry, but then they withdrew after that. So yeah, I have to not use the word possible because it's not possible to use the word possible. So so that's all for this situation over at Blokhoivka. Fighting is still ongoing. I still cannot believe that the Russian Defense Ministry declared that they have captured it. Yeah, so let's just wait and see. Over the Bakhmut Front, at the Bakhmut Front, there is no fighting reported in the southern part, in the Klishchiivka and Drievka region. So totally no fighting being reported in this area here. What we do have is the fighting over in the western part of Bakhmut city. Russian forces are pushing Kreminna, Novi region, as well as towards Chasivya. So it is one big arrow direction towards Chasivya. That's the situation. There's some geolocation. Ukrainian forces geolocated on the western part of Kreminna. Russian forces geolocated northeast, showing that the Russians have progressed in the northeastern area, and there's a geolocation just off Novi where the Russians are trying to launch an attack towards Novi. The Kreminna one is interesting because the Russians seems to have captured all these entrenchments around here. All these entrenchments have been taken by the Russian forces as they are geolocated around here, which give them a good platform to launch further attacks, and which will allow them to attack from the north and through the forest and through the main road towards Kreminna. So this will it creates a much more better condition for the Russian forces to operate in. So we will just wait and see how the Russians would react from this point onward. The situation in Novi is interesting because despite that we previously have this geolocation of Russians inside Novi, it seems like they did not stay there. There's a high chance that the Ukrainians have retaken all of this position because the Russians are struggling to get near to Novi. The Russians geolocated at this position. The armored vehicles was driving through the field, trying to land troops or somewhat, and then they got hit by some kind of a anti-tank guided missile or some turrets, some projectiles. So it does show that the Ukrainians have some kind of presence around this area here, and it could also be because the Ukrainians may have this forest that is claimed by the Russians, but has not been given up by the Ukrainian mapping. So the Ukrainian forces may have infiltrated to the forest edge and launch attacks on the Russian convoy or the attack troops along the way. That's a possibility. So we're not sure that these are all fog of war. We'll just continue to just wait and see whether any frontline changes, because ultimately when we come to footages or geolocations, we do not actually fully confirm the date of the capture of these videos. It could be belated. So so we can only trust it to a certain extent. But it's still indicative, based on geolocation, it's still indicative of the situation. Over at New-York, the Ukrainian forces are attacking at Sumy, and that's all we know of the situation at New-York. Over at the Avdiivka front, we have to cut into two because too much things happening. So Russian forces are clashing Ukrainians at Ocheretine. Russian forces are pushing, the Ukrainians are clashing with them. Ukrainian forces counter-attack over at Novo-Oleksandrivka. Russians attack towards Yehernivka. Towards Oskil, Ukrainian forces counter-attack at Solovyove. Ukrainians also counter-attack at Novoporovsky, but Russians are attacking towards Novoselivka, Persia. So it's very messy right now. As you can see, the Russians are no longer having the initiative in this front line as the Ukrainians are trying to push back. So we will definitely continue to see to pay a lot of attention in this area here, because the Ukrainians have not given up on this pincer, and they are now pushing through to try to push the Russians back. But the Russians are still attacking in their own way to capture Sokil. So yeah, everybody have their own initiative right now. So let's see how. In the southern flank, the situation is a bit more pro-Russian. Yeah. So Russians have taken a tree line in the area of Umansky as the Ukrainians desperately counterattack. Russian forces are pushing Yasno-Brodivka. They have also secured the area around Netelove, and they are pushing out towards Kharkivka, and they are also attacking out of Novopovomaysky and in the area of Nevelsky. So this area here in the southern flank of the Avdiivka front, Russian forces clearly have more initiative, and it seems to be the current focus of the Avdiivka offensive. So at the Nevelsky region, we don't have much except that the Russians is starting to try to push and take this salient that Ukrainians have done very well in defending. Losing this entire area south of Netelove, it will be a big hit for the Ukrainians because the Russians can just bypass the Ukrainians by hitting the entrenchments north of Nevelsky, leaving these forces over here meaningless. So we will just wait and see. Over at the Donetsk Front, we have the usual with Russians. The Battle of Krasnohorivka continue, fighting in the area of Konstantinivka and in the area of Velika Novosilka. So Battle of Krasnohorivka, we don't have much updates. We only have the Russian side reporting about the fighting in this area. They only say there's fighting there. And now over at the Konstantinivka region, Russian forces are pushing Konstantinivka, south of Konstantinivka, as well as towards Vodian. So there is a full front line push around this area here. Reports coming from Ukrainian Defense Ministry. Mostly from the Ukrainian Defense Ministry. So it's a full frontal assault, it seems. It's a big push in this direction. So let's see. The other front line change. So no more Volodymyrivka. There's no Prishestivka. So now is over at the Velika Novosilka sector, and the Russians are attacking, continuing their assault in the battle of Staromayorsky as well as Uruzhaine. This continues with the Russians continue to try to make progress towards Makarivka. There is a weird report from the Ukrainian side, or is it Russian side? Let me see. From the Ukrainian side, they mentioned that they repelled an attack in the area of Rozdony. Rozdony is a little bit way too far away from the front line. And I have checked that this is basically Vremivka direction. So I have no idea, where exactly they are trying to refer to, Rozdony. So we will just wait and see whether they will change the name of that location or not, because I don't have this location anywhere near any front line. And then we move into the Zaporizhzhia Front. At the Zaporizhzhia Front, we only have one report of fighting reported in the area of Robotine, according to the Ukrainian Defense Ministry. This front line around here has become a total mystery. No one knows what is happening right now. The Russians seems to be, half-hearted in this area. So looks like the Russians are pretty happy with the front line, I guess. All my speculation that the possible, of the Russians possible, maybe trying to take all the Kiev through, Andriivka and Novodanilivka, has went dead, is just invalidated. So that's all from Zaporizhzhia. Over at the Kherson Front, we have the usual with fighting reporter at Krinky. According to the Ukrainian Defense Ministry, they are very adamant that the Russians are pushing there. And there is Russian Defense Ministry simply focused on the shelling at Tyakhinka. So that's about it with Russian pushing here and shelling Tyakhinka. And that's it. So this is the SITREP, or the situation report or summary for the day of 824 for the 27th of May. Do press the like button, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next update.